You know what the biggest lie in life is? That you need motivation, inspiration, or some miracle moment to finally change. The truth is brutally simple. Your life changes the moment you stop negotiating with your excuses and start doing what you said you would do. Most people wait for the perfect time. Winners create it. Most people wait for energy. Achievers generate it. Most people wait for the right mindset. High performers build it through action. Most people sit around waiting for the perfect wave of motivation to hit them, as if some magical spark will suddenly fix their discipline, their goals, and their life. But the truth is far more uncomfortable. Motivation is a feeling, and feelings are unstable. Some days you wake up energized, some days you wake up exhausted, and most days you wake up somewhere in between. If the quality of your life depends on how you feel in the morning, you've already lost. The people who win aren't the ones who feel motivated. They're the ones who act whether they feel like it or not. Action builds momentum. Momentum builds confidence. And confidence builds results that motivation could never give you. Every time you act without motivation, you send a signal to your brain that you're in control, not your emotions. That single decision, choosing discipline over comfort, rewires your identity faster than any motivational video ever could. Acting without motivation is how you break the cycle of procrastination, because the moment you move, the excuses lose their power. Most people don't realize that the first step is always the hardest, not because the task is difficult, but because their mind is negotiating against it. When you shut down that negotiation, you instantly move into a different category of human being. Imagine what happens when you stop waiting and start doing. Not tomorrow, not later, not when you feel ready. Now. You'd quickly see that the energy you thought you needed shows up after you start, not before. Motivation isn't a spark that starts the fire. It's the heat that shows up once the fire is already burning. But most people never start the fire, so they never feel the heat. They sit in the cold, calling themselves unmotivated, when the truth is they simply haven't trained themselves to act first. Action is a habit, and like any habit, it gets easier the more you practice it. The first time you push yourself through resistance, it feels heavy. The 10th time, it feels normal. The 100th time, it feels automatic. The more you repeat the process, the more you condition yourself to stop relying on temporary feelings and start relying on the consistency that creates real results. You build discipline through repetition, not inspiration. When you stop depending on motivation, you start depending on yourself. That shift is powerful because it puts your results in your hands, not in circumstance or emotion. You become predictable to yourself. You know that no matter how tired you are, how stressful the day is, or how little you feel like doing the work, you will still show up. That predictability is how champions operate. They don't wait, they execute. This mindset immediately separates you from the average person. Most people live their entire lives reacting to how they feel at any given moment. You start living your life based on the commitments you've made. You stop breaking promises to yourself. And the moment you stop breaking those promises, you build an internal reputation that fuels confidence without needing external hype. When you choose action over motivation, you start experience progress every single day. Even if the progress is small, it compounds. One disciplined decision leads to another. One completed task leads to a clearer mind. One moment of effort leads to a stronger identity. Over time, you stop identifying as someone who tries and start identifying as someone who follows through. That mental shift changes everything you touch. And the best part is that once you train yourself to act without motivation, you eliminate the biggest barrier that stops most people from ever succeeding. Because the people who win in life aren't the ones who are the most talented or the most inspired. They're the ones who act regardless of how they feel. Most people wake up and immediately look for the easiest task, the quickest hit of progress, or something that makes them feel productive without actually moving their life forward. They avoid the one thing that actually matters, the hard, uncomfortable, mentally demanding task that would create real momentum. That single avoidance is the reason most people feel stuck. They check off tiny tasks all day long, but never touch the thing that would change everything. And the reason is simple. The hardest task is the one that forces you to confront your limits, your doubts, and your excuses. But that's exactly why doing it first transforms you. When you attack the hardest task first, you take control of your day before the world has a chance to interfere. You silence the mental negotiation that usually drains your energy. You don't give yourself time to overthink, procrastinate, or talk yourself out of it. You build a habit of decisive action, not emotional hesitation. And when your brain realizes that you do the hardest thing before anything else, it stops resisting at the same level. The task doesn't get easier, but you get stronger, sharper, more efficient, and more confident in your ability to handle things that most people run from. There's something powerful that happens when you take the hardest task and do it when your willpower is highest. You stack the day in your favor. You create a psychological win before the day even begins. That win changes your posture, your decisions, your energy, and your identity for the next 23 hours. Instead of feeling behind all day, you walk with momentum. Instead of feeling guilty for avoiding the important thing, you feel empowered for dominating it. That shift affects every conversation, every task, and every opportunity that follows. Most people never experience this because they spend their morning hiding from their obligations. They scroll, they distract themselves, they pretend they're busy, and they lie to themselves about why they're not doing the hard thing. They think they need more clarity, more motivation, or more time. But clarity comes from doing, motivation comes from progress, and time is something you create by eliminating avoidance. Once you stop playing that mental game, you realize that the hardest task first is the shortcut to feeling powerful and in control. Doing the hard thing first eliminates drag. Drag is the mental weight you carry all day when you avoid something important. It slows you down, creates anxiety, steals your focus, and drains your emotional bandwidth. But the moment you knock out that one task, the drag disappears. Suddenly, the small tasks feel lighter. The stress melts. The rest of the day feels easier because the heaviest weight is already gone. This is why high performers get more done by noon than most people do in a full day. They remove drag before it accumulates. What you choose to do first is a signal to yourself about what matters. If you choose the easy thing, you reinforce the identity of someone who avoids responsibility. If you choose the hard thing, you reinforce the identity of someone who does what others won't. Identity shapes behavior, and behavior shapes results. This is why doing the hardest task first isn't just a productivity trick, it's a rewiring of who you are and how you operate in the world. There will always be a part of your brain that wants comfort, and it will always resist the hard thing. But repetition kills resistance. Every time you choose difficulty over comfort, that internal resistance gets a little weaker. Eventually, you become someone who seeks out the challenging work because you've learned that's where the growth, opportunity, and breakthroughs are. You start to crave the feeling of getting the big thing done early because nothing else gives you that same sense of command. And when this becomes a daily habit, your life starts to change faster than you expect. You no longer waste hours avoiding your real responsibilities. You no longer feel overwhelmed by what you need to do. You no longer let fear or discomfort dictate your decisions. You build a pattern of execution that compounds into skill, confidence, and results at a pace that feels unfair to people who are still operating in avoidance mode. Most people don't realize that self-trust isn't something you're born with. It's something you build brick by brick every time you keep a promise to yourself. The reason so many people feel lost, inconsistent, or unconfident is because they've spent years breaking their own word. They say they'll wake up early and they don't. They say they'll start the project and they delay it. They say they'll change their habits and they quit after 2 days. Every broken promise chips away at their identity until they stop believing anything they say. But the moment you start doing exactly what you told yourself you'd do, everything changes at the identity level first, and the results follow naturally. Keeping promises to yourself creates a kind of internal stability that most people never experience. You stop questioning whether you can handle something because your actions already proved it yesterday and the day before and the week before that. This consistency builds a quiet, unshakable confidence, not the loud, fake confidence that depends on compliments or motivation, but the deep confidence that comes from knowing you don't need external permission to follow through. You become someone who relies on actions, not feelings, and that's when you become impossible to stop. The more you follow through, the more reliable you become to yourself. Reliability is one of the greatest advantages a person can have because when you know you can trust your own word, you stop hesitating. Hesitation is born from doubt. Action is born from trust. When you trust yourself, decisions get faster. Execution gets sharper. Momentum becomes your normal state. Most people stay stuck because they don't trust themselves enough to take the first step, but the moment you rebuild that trust, the first step becomes automatic. There's something powerful that happens when you become your own reference point. Instead of looking to others for validation, approval, or reassurance, you look at your own track record. And if your track record is built on consistency, discipline, and follow through, you naturally expect more from yourself. That expectation creates higher standards, and higher standards create better results. You don't rise to your goals. You rise to the standards you hold yourself to daily. Self-trust raises those standards without forcing anything. Every small promise kept becomes proof that you're capable of more. Small wins compound into bigger wins, and bigger wins reshape who you believe you are. The internal dialogue shifts from, I hope I can, to I know I can. Most people chase confidence, but confidence is a byproduct of evidence. And the only way to create evidence is through consistent discipline. Every day you follow through. You're building a portfolio of proof that you are exactly the kind of person who gets things done. This process doesn't require perfection. It requires honesty. Honesty about what you're actually willing to commit to. Honesty about what you can realistically execute. And honesty about the habits you need to eliminate. Most people set goals based on who they wish they were, not who they actually are. And because the goals don't match their current identity, they break promises and lose even more trust. But when you set commitments you can execute consistently, you start building a ladder of trust one rung at a time, and eventually that ladder takes you higher than motivation ever could. As your self-trust grows, your tolerance for your own excuses shrinks. You stop accepting your own stories about why you can't, or why tomorrow is better, or why now isn't the right time. You've built too much evidence of your capability to believe those excuses anymore. The more you practice discipline, the more allergic you become to your own nonsense. That alone puts you in a category of people who actually achieve what they say they want, rather than just talking about it. And once you operate from a place of strong self-trust, you move through life differently. You walk faster, think clearer, and take action sooner. You stop waiting for permission because you no longer need it. You stop doubting your potential because your actions have already proven it. And every step you take reinforces the belief that you can rely on yourself regardless of circumstances, feelings, or obstacles, creating a level of personal power that most people never experience. Most people convince themselves they're putting in effort simply because they feel busy, but feelings are terrible metrics for growth. The only thing that tells the truth is data, and the moment you start tracking your actions, your habits, and your progress, you come face to face with reality. Reality doesn't care about your intentions, your motivations, or your excuses. It only reflects what you actually did. This is why measurement is so powerful. It removes the emotional filter and shows you exactly where you stand without the stories you tell yourself. When you measure consistently, you start to see patterns you were blind to before. You notice which days you slack off, which tasks take longer than expected, which habits move the needle, and which habits waste your time. Most people repeat the same unproductive cycles because they never zoom out and analyze themselves. But once you start tracking, you identify your weaknesses, your strengths, your tendencies, and your blind spots. That awareness becomes the leverage you need to break old cycles and build new ones that actually lead somewhere. Tracking also forces you to confront the gap between what you want and what you're doing. Everyone has goals. Everyone wants more money, more health, more freedom, more growth. But wanting something and working toward it are two completely different lives. When you track your progress, you can't hide behind talk or intent anymore. You either did the work or you didn't. And that clarity becomes a mirror that pushes you to close the gap, because you can no longer pretend the gap doesn't exist. Data gives you control in a way emotion never can. Emotion fluctuates daily. Data gives you a stable reference point. You can look at a simple chart or checklist and know exactly whether you're on track or falling behind. This reduces anxiety because nothing is unknown anymore. You're not guessing, hoping, or assuming. You're evaluating based on facts. And when you operate based on facts, your decision-making improves instantly. You stop making reactive choices and start making strategic ones. Over time, measurement makes you more objective about yourself. Instead of taking failure personally, you treat it like information. Instead of taking success as luck, you see the patterns that created it. This objectivity is what allows high performers to improve rapidly. They're not emotionally attached to their actions. They're focused on the outcome. If something works, they scale it. If something doesn't, they change it. Tracking gives you the clarity to do the same without hesitation. Most people avoid measuring their progress because they're afraid to discover the truth. They don't want to see that they're inconsistent, distracted, or underperforming. But the truth is the only thing that sets you free. When you finally face the numbers, the avoidance ends. You can't lie to yourself anymore. You can't pretend you're disciplined when the data shows gaps. You can't pretend you're working hard when the numbers say otherwise. And strangely, this honesty is liberating because you now have something solid to fix. The more you track, the more motivated you become, not because motivation magically appears, but because progress becomes visible. When you see numbers improving, habits stacking, streaks growing, and outcomes compounding, you feel momentum in a way that emotions alone can't generate. You start competing with your past self. You start pushing for better numbers, better consistency, better execution. Progress becomes addictive when you can see it clearly, and eventually tracking becomes a natural part of how you operate. It stops feeling like a chore and starts feeling like maintenance. Just like checking a dashboard before driving, you check the dashboard of your habits and your goals to stay aligned. And by doing that consistently, you create a life built on clarity, not chaos, built on truth, not assumption, built on measurable improvement rather than wishful thinking. Most people spend their entire lives consuming information without ever doing anything with it, and then they wonder why nothing changes. They watch videos, read quotes, listen to podcasts, and stack knowledge endlessly, but knowledge without application is just entertainment. The people who actually transform their lives are the ones who maintain a daily rhythm of learning and building. They take in information to sharpen their thinking, then immediately use that information to upgrade their reality. Learning feeds the mind, but building feeds the future, And when you combine the two every single day, you create a compounding effect that is almost impossible to stop. When you dedicate a consistent block of time each day to learning, you begin to expose yourself to new ideas, new strategies, new perspectives, and new ways of thinking that you would never discover by accident. You start connecting dots faster. You start seeing opportunities that used to be invisible to you. You start understanding patterns in behavior, business, communication, money, and mindset that separate average performers from high performers. Learning expands your mental capacity, and the more capacity you build, the more problems you can solve, and the more valuable you become in any environment. But learning alone is not enough. If you only consume, you become overloaded with information and underdeveloped in execution. The real transformation happens when you take what you learned and immediately translate it into action. This is where the daily building session comes in. It forces you to move from theory to application. If you learn a strategy, you implement it. If you learn a skill, you practice it. If you learn a mindset shift, you act on it. Building is what turns invisible knowledge into visible progress. And without that step, growth never leaves the realm of imagination. Most people never build daily because they think they need hours of free time, perfect conditions, or a spark of motivation to begin. But progress doesn't require perfection, it requires consistency. 30 minutes a day of focus building is enough to write a chapter, develop a skill, produce content, create a product, refine your craft, or improve your performance. That half-hour compounds over weeks, months, and years into a level of mastery that people who wait for the right time will never touch. The consistency matters more than the duration. As you learn and build daily, something powerful starts happening. You begin closing the gap between who you are and who you want to be. Most people live stuck in that gap because they learn what they should do, but never apply it long enough to make it part of their identity. But when you repeat the cycle of input and output every day, the gap shrinks. You start becoming a person whose actions match their ambitions. You stop wishing and start dreaming and start creating. You stop consuming for comfort and start learning for growth. This daily rhythm builds confidence in a way nothing else can. When you learn something new, you expand. When you build something real, you progress. That combination creates a self-reinforcing loop where every day you feel yourself becoming sharper, stronger, and more capable. You don't need external validation because your own results validate you. You don't need motivation because your own progress fuels you. You start waking up with purpose because you know that each day will move you forward, even if only by a small amount. Over time, the separation between you and everyone else becomes undeniable. While others remain stuck in cycles of consuming without applying, you are stacking skills, creating results, and leveling up consistently. While others are trapped in information overload, you are turning knowledge into execution. While others waste years waiting for the right moment, you are using every day as a building block for the life you want. This difference becomes massive when layered over months and then years, and it becomes the reason some people excel while others stagnate. Eventually, learning and building daily stops feeling like a task and becomes part of who you are. It becomes your operating system. You no longer look for shortcuts because you've built the habits that make shortcuts unnecessary. You no longer fear competition because you've outworked the version of yourself from yesterday. And as long as you continue learning and building every day, there is no ceiling on how far you can go or how much you can grow. Most people live their entire lives in preparation mode. They make plans, rewrite them, refine them, and then redesign them again because planning feels productive without requiring any real risk. It gives the illusion of progress while protecting them from the discomfort of action. But nothing changes until you start doing. You can think about the gym all you want, but your body won't change until you show up. You can dream about a business for years, but your life won't improve until you build something. You can talk about goals endlessly, but goals only matter when you take the first uncomfortable step toward them. Planning is safe. Action is exposing. And that's why action is the only thing that actually moves your life forward. People love talking about their dreams because talking creates dopamine. It feels good. It gives a temporary sense of accomplishment without requiring any commitment. The problem is that the brain starts mistaking talking for progress, and the more you talk without acting, the harder it becomes to act at all. You teach yourself to be someone who speaks instead of someone who executes. Over time, you build a habit of emotional gratification instead of a habit of real growth. The gap between what you say and what you do gets wider, and that gap is where regret grows. Dreaming without action becomes mental clutter. You collect ideas the same way people collect dust. Layers and layers of them sitting there, untouched, becoming heavier and harder to ignore. You start feeling overwhelmed, not because you're doing too much, but because you're doing nothing with the things you claim you want. The dreams that once excited you start to feel stressful because they're reminders of the promises you never kept. When you stop acting, your dreams become obligations instead of opportunities. Action is the antidote to overwhelm because action clears the mental fog. The moment you start doing even something small, you create clarity. You get immediate feedback. You see what works, what doesn't, what needs adjusting, and what doesn't matter at all. This is something planning can never give you because plans are made in theory while action happens in reality. And reality is always more accurate. When you act, you learn faster, you course correct quicker, you gain experience that no amount of thinking could ever create. Most people underestimate how powerful the smallest action can be. They wait for the perfect set of conditions, perfect knowledge, perfect timing, perfect confidence before starting anything. But perfection is another form of procrastination. The truth is that success comes from stacking thousands of imperfect actions over time. You don't get clarity and confidence first. You earn them by showing up and doing the work before you feel ready. The person who takes one small step every day will always outrun the person who sits and plans the perfect step they never take. There is a level of momentum that only reveals itself once you begin. At first, starting feels heavy because your brain is wired to protect you from uncertainty. But once you push past that initial resistance, something shifts. Each action makes the next one easier. Each small win creates energy. Momentum builds, and with enough repetition, motion becomes your default instead of hesitation. People call this discipline, but really, it's just the compound effect of repeated action overpowering old hesitation. Execution is what separates daydreamers from achievers. Anyone can think, hope, or plan. Few people take the uncomfortable step that turns an idea into a result. The moment you shift your identity from someone who wants to do things to someone who does things, your entire life changes trajectory. You start trusting yourself more because you finally have proof that you follow through. You start expecting more from yourself because you've built a pattern of action. You stop overthinking because you're too busy producing. And once action becomes your foundation, you no longer need motivation or perfect conditions to move forward. You move because movement is who you are. You create because creating is what you do. You execute because execution has become the core of your identity. And when your identity is rooted in action rather than intention, there is no limit to what you can build or who you can become. In the end, everything you want, everything you dream about, and everything you believe you deserve will only come to you when you decide to stop waiting for people to understand you and start building yourself in silence. The world listens to results, not explanations, and the day you choose to value your own growth over outside validation is the day your entire life begins to shift in ways you never imagined. Your silence becomes your sharpest weapon, your discipline becomes your strongest voice, and your transformation becomes undeniable proof that you never needed permission to rise. You must understand that life rewards those who take responsibility for their outcomes, not those who wait for the perfect moment or flawless conditions. Every step you take in private strengthens you. Every sacrifice becomes a brick in the foundation you're building. Every early morning, every late night, every moment of resistance you push through, these are the quiet battles that create loud victories. And when the world finally sees you succeed, they will call it luck, but you will know it was discipline. The truth is your journey will not be understood by most people. They will question you, doubt you, and sometimes even laugh at you, but that is the cost of seeing what others can't. You are not meant to be ordinary. You are not meant to blend in. Your potential is louder than the noise around you, and once you commit to becoming the strongest version of yourself, no opinion will ever have the power to slow you down again. You owe it to yourself to walk away from distractions, to protect your energy, to build an environment where growth is your oxygen. When you choose yourself, you don't become selfish, you become unstoppable. You stop breaking yourself to keep others comfortable. You stop shrinking to fit spaces that were never built for your greatness. You stop searching for approval because you finally realize success itself is the only approval you will ever need. There will be days when the journey feels lonely, days when you question the path, days when you wonder if the sacrifice is worth it. But those are the days that shape champions. Those are the days that forge resilience. Those are the days that separate dreamers from doers. Keep going, keep building, keep holding yourself to the standard that scares you, because that standard is the doorway to the life you want. You are closer than you think. Every small step is progress. Every moment of discipline compounds. Every quiet decision to improve becomes a loud transformation in the future. You don't need applause. You don't need validation. You don't need someone to tell you you're capable. You need action, consistency, and the courage to outgrow the version of yourself that kept you comfortable. So walk forward with power. Walk forward with clarity. Walk forward knowing that everything you are becoming is already inside you. You're just uncovering it day by day. The world may not see your effort yet, but one day they will not be able to ignore your results anymore.